When you have multiple elite pathways available, our question in golf continuously hinges on the ratio of certainty of benefits and risk. Specifically, why would you choose the career that front loads all of the suffering that we have mentioned, ties reward to macro luck, and kills your identity to an irreversible amount of damage, just because you were so arrogant to assume that you can have an easy access to a non-entry point career that you yourself do not have any capability to put a risk on. First issue then, on the starting point and pathway of the career of the actor in itself. I want you to listen to the analysis of each teams in terms of assurance. The first line of material from UP is to accuse us that we are just fear-mongering because the industry will absorb all of the harms that will happen within this economic industry. But the problem is, we told you that this is specific external harm that you cannot control literally directly ties to your career because the tournament basis model that hedge fund industries have. It only takes one AUM swing or one macro shock for your career to decline. Much worse, you're left with no contingency to bounce back because you spent your formative years within this condemnatory areas. In the end, you will be known as someone who fucked up the protection of hedge funds when there's literally a collapse within the cycles of AI bubble burst, even though it's not your fault that Oracle, Nvidia, and OpenAI shitted their own cycle. Aside from this upcoming downside that we have proven to be true, much more likely, the fact that capital flows, investor sentiment, and macro cycles can abruptly determine whether your role expands or disappears, no matter how smart and great you are the critical harms which are still expanding in this debate, which gained no response from them. Comparatively, the foolproof linear career of up here actually happens in our side because gradual progression through roles like investment banking, corporate finance, or the financial controllership provides you a structured and predictable development curve, as Joseph mentioned. In this path, you build technical competence step by step, like financial modeling, transaction execution, budgeting, or maybe risk management, and all of those compliance within institutional guardrails. So promotion is typically tied directly to a measurable performance that you yourself as an actor, a talented one, can have, and tenure rather than having volatile external factors that we have mentioned. That means that you will have the stronger control of agency on how your career will rise and fall. Second then, on the risk, we ask you whether the actor have the capacity to take this and bounce back in the worst case. But opposition is still dismissive, which is much more likely, which we told you to be much more likely to happen. This is why it's critical for them to respond to this, because we have the upcoming AI bubble burst. We have the current geopolitical tension. They just simply said that it will be absorbed within the industry. But the problem is, in itself, it is directly tied to the actor. So, on the risk, we interrogate the capacity of the actor, not just the confidence that you get from up. The question is not whether this graduate is talented, but does the actor possess the structural resilience to absorb concentrated downside and re-enter the market at equal strength? In hedge fund tournament, the worst case is not merely no promotion in comparison to our harms. It is 5 to 6 years of hyper-specialized exposure during a macro downturn, followed by contraction in headcount precisely when exit options are the weakest. So, if an AI-driven asset inflation cycle bursts, compressing valuation, shrinking AUM, and triggering deleveraging option that you have, then therefore, in their side of the house, the actor will be put at risk because hedge fund cut risk first and personal second. So the analysts are downstream of the capital flow. Comparatively then, in our side, bounce back capacity depends on our transferability. This is why Joseph is mentioning all of the transferability skills under the actor. In hedge fund path, early years are dominated by portfolio modeling, risk analytics, and internal administrative execution. Deep but narrow competencies tied to market cycles that you cannot control. Even if you exit during contraction, you enter a labor market that is contracting within your finance. Your network is clustered in the same ecosystem, facing the same shock. So, in gradual progression path, however you accumulate cross-functional skills, like all of the things that Up mentioned, you will remain valuable in our side, even when capital markets freeze. But sure, I'll take it if you want.
Actually, so contingent on this actor having agency, and economic downfalls are symmetric. You need investors still to formulate your startup company. If people aren't confident in you without any form of connections or anything to back you up, how do you
First of all, your connection that you build in your side aren't really that linear. You operate in a competitive cycle. That means it's easy for them to brush you off. Secondly, you don't need to start your own company. You just need to join them in our side and get promotion. Thirdly, it's not a symmetrical harm because in our side, we already told you that in itself, even if you have economic downturns, even if you absorb all of those harms, it's not directly tied to your career in itself. Even if you have the capacity to bounce back. That's the really literal explanation at this point. Finally, then, we compare the psychological and financial convexity of recovery in depth. So, hedge funds' upside is steep, but so is the drop. That's why lifestyle inflation begins early, as Joseph mentioned. The problem is compensation expectations anchor quickly in up, just like what they were built on. This is where we ask, when macro contraction coincides with career stagnation, the adjustment cost is severe. Like, you can have reputational and financial and psychological harms. In more gradual path in our side, income scales more linearly, allows the risk to be absorbed incrementally within the comparative. So even if an AI bubble bursts across the section, the exposure is diffused rather than consecrated at the tip of the financial speculation that we have within this debate. So the competitive analysis is clear. The hedge fund world concentrates macro risk at the very start of your career, while alternative pathway distribute risk across institution and time. That's why we have the benefit of all. Rational actors with elite optionality should prefer to be distributed risk over early age volatility compression. Third, we ask, where does the actor accrue the fulfillment to have formative standing with their ideal standing? Third, what we told you is that hedge fund environment of structurally performance minimizing spaces. Status is directly tied to your quarterly returns. No one can just help you if you fucked up. That's why in our side, we told you that at least in our side, even if you fucked up, there are incentives for a company to help you. There are incentives for a team to help you because it's not option and because it's not based on what you can do for the tournament in itself. So, in their world, you front load extreme volatility in exchange for conditional upside for the actor. Your early 20s are absorbed by a tournament where effort is necessary but not sufficient, and macro cycle partially determine whether you win or stall. If what Up said is true, you are motivated, but you kill that motivation in the long run because your identity, network, and skills are heavily financialized, and your exit becomes progressively harder within this condition. Very proud, though, folks.